Hey, I'm Cal, and a number of years ago, I had an epiphany I'd like to share with everybody here, and that is everything is screaming at each other all the time. And to explain what I mean by that, let's start with something everyone's heard about, that is analog versus digital. And specifically by analog, I mean the perfectly smooth sinusoidal waveforms of analog signals. And by digital, they're blocky rectangular approximations. So, starting with analog signals are continuous waves of real physical information wrapped up and transported through wires or radio waves and ultimately untangled and amplified at their destination. So think of things like VHS tapes or vinyl records. However, in reality, an analog signal is a bit more complicated. But fortunately, an 18th century French mathematician figured out how to disassemble these waveforms into their individual components, and eventually scientists used this principle to pack together different analog signals, like the red, green, and blue components of a complete image, or even the simultaneous audiovisual content of different television channels. And while all of this is incredible, there's some significant downsides. Most importantly, there's a physical limit to how many signals you can squeeze together before they start to overlap and interfere with their neighbors. So let's look at an example. A television network grabs a VHS tape and feeds it into their broadcasting station, which transforms it into radio waves that shoot across the air into this room where each television can decide to tune into this signal, adjust its volume, and even switch channels. And let's pause here to consider that the waves of light that were originally captured to create the very first copy of this roll of film are still physically present, if slightly deteriorated and manipulated, in the copy fed into the broadcasting station and eventually into your eyeballs. Analog signals are tangible, physical gateways into their original source, and there is something so simple and elegant about this experience. So keep this in mind as we move to digital signals, which actually look like this and are characterized by periods of high and low, on and off, those ones and zeros we've all heard about. And to explain how this can become that rectangular approximation, let's jump back into our original analog signal and pick one point we are going to sample and convert. So maybe think of this point as the RGB value of a single pixel on your laptop screen, or the decibels of a certain bass frequency in a song you're listening to. And the burst of digital information representing that single point starts high and goes low and back to high and can be represented by this binary string. So think of this as something like Morse code, where these ones and zeros are part of a binary alphabet that define the number 170. And you don't necessarily need to understand this, but the point I'm trying to make is that the faster you can toggle these states, the faster you can blink on and off a wireless antenna, the faster you can communicate more and more digital information. And if you can do this fast enough, there are a ton of advantages. But first, let's quickly recap. We said analog signals are continuous and tangible, as they literally directly capture physical phenomena. However, they are limited by the mediums that they travel through, which affect their range, clarity, reproducibility, and flexibility. While digital signals are approximate, imperfect representations of physical phenomena that are incorporeal, bodiless, just patterns of ones and zeros, infinitely reproducible and divisible, which makes them versatile, able to communicate all types of information through these same mediums. So, let's look at one more example to explain how your smart TV actually receives video content from Netflix. We'll use the standard network model, which you can think of as increasingly verbose layers of digital exchanges where upper layers stack multiple iterations of the layers beneath them. So, starting with the physical layer, or the medium with which the ones and zeros actually travel through, like through an Ethernet cable or over the air using wireless antennas. And this is essentially the digital signal we've already described. So that means every layer on top of this is an entirely abstract construction. Let's move up to the data link layer, which two devices use to know they are linked by sending these small link layer messages back and forth, which leads me to a key point. The messages in this layer, and really in every layer we're describing, are shouted aimlessly through the ether in all possible directions. I want this. I don't care. Who should I ask? Ask that guy. What did you say? What did you say? What did you say? And through that commotion, how does your router know that your TV wants to talk to Netflix specifically? And that's when the network layer directs your messages internally to devices on the same network or externally across the world, and it achieves this via this layer's incessant bidirectional information exchanges, where our devices are constantly acknowledging and forwarding and requesting and ignoring messages, and yet we haven't even sent any meaningful information yet. To do that, we'll need the transport layer, which actually contains our raw data, and layers to establish data flows and decrypt information until we reach the application layer, which, if we're being generous, might contain a sixth of a second of digitized high definition video content. And now imagine this process inverted with hundreds of digital communications cascading back downward and bouncing across the internet in reverse until finally your TV receives its precious content. So now, everybody, say it with me. Everything is screaming at each other all the time. And there are consequences to this. Our high speed wireless transmissions require ever increasing densities of technical infrastructure that has given rise to smaller, faster, more efficient devices that have proliferated through all of our lives to the point where intelligence agencies can use our metadata to identify disruptive behavior patterns and can even use the antennas in your home router to map interior spaces, detect objects, or track individuals. And private companies could use the infrared camera in your iPhone to approximate your emotional state as you scroll through Instagram, or use lasers to identify the unique way you navigate their aisles. But most importantly, just imagine how all of this permeates through our psyches, this tantalizing digital complexity that, while at first crudely mimicked physical reality, has now become virtually indistinguishable from it, paradoxically offering so much more but somehow less at the same time. The analog society is tangible, physical, real, and it builds towering beacons that project themselves indifferently like gods into our homes, while the digital society builds unfathomable quantities and micro complexities, hyperreal approximations, and personalized information highways of relentless digital exchanges that have woven deep into our homes and our minds and offer powerful people a uniquely intimate look into who we are, what we do, and why. There is literally a rainbow colored spider web of digital infrastructure coursing through our lives. And much like a spider feels disturbances on its web, our institutions can react, adapt, and ultimately control our fates. Thank you. And for you on the
Woo!
line, Olivia, you can't see this, but I built this little thing with a Raspberry Pi, and that's a picture of it. And it's got these antennas that are, well, I guess I'll just show you.